Top Gun: Maverick and Lightyear are two of this summer's biggest movies, and they both have awesome vehicles moving really fast. So today I'm turning Maverick's F-14 fighter jet into Buzz Lightyear's XL-15 spaceship as fast as humanly possible. This is Kitbash Creatures. I've made a few episodes of this show, but so far we've been kinda heavy on the creatures and a little light on the kit bashing, so today we're gonna fix that. Kit bashing, if you're unfamiliar, is the process of taking bits and pieces of different toys and making something new, sorta like what Sid was doing to his toys in Toy Story 1. Today, I'm going to be cannibalizing Revell's officially licensed Top Gun model kit of a 1/48 scale Grumman F-14 Tomcat fighter jet, and also dipping into my box of spare parts, as well as using some plastic sheets and rods that are made for this kind of thing. Now, fair warning, I'm doing this quick and dirty. If you're after a screen-accurate replica of a Star Command XL-15 from the hit summer film Lightyear, that's not what we're making exactly. They make official toys of those, and I'll actually be using some product shots as reference. Think of this as more of an experimental prototype. And in the interest of time, I will be measuring once and cutting twice, and my haste will probably make some waste. But I feel the need for speed. That's right, Iceman, I am dangerous. Now this kit might look brand spanking new, but it's actually made from an old mold. This particular model predates the original Top Gun film by almost a decade, originally released in 1978, just a few years after the real-life F-14 took flight. As such, the tooling isn't super sharp, and I found that the pieces don't fit together super well, which is probably for the best because I don't feel as guilty about absolutely gutting this poor plane. I jammed a piece of foam core into the fuselage to keep it hopefully stable because I'm going to be handling this thing a lot, and I need a solid foundation to glue all the parts onto. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at this project to see what sticks, in some cases literally. For glue, I'm mostly using hobby cement, which, unlike other glues, actually melts the plastic to bond it together, and holding it in place with a variety of clips and rubber bands. I'm also going to be using a hot glue gun and probably burning myself a few times. Now the plastic sheets I'm cutting up are basically the same material as the model kits, but it's a bit easier to cut and glue them. I was kind of wary about using them at first, but they are shockingly cooperative, which is nice. A lot of my spare parts are from Star Wars model kits, and it almost feels like cheating to kit bash with them since all of the ships in the original trilogy were actually kit bashed to begin with. In fact, if this F-14's body is giving you some Star Wars deja vu, that's probably because an F-14 fuselage was also used to make an A-Wing in Return of the Jedi. Fittingly enough, Pixar actually began as Lucasfilm's computer graphics group, so this all kind of ties together pretty well. Meanwhile, Top Gun uses actual friggin' jets, which is way cooler than anything you can do with plastic model kits or a computer. The ships in Star Wars were made using a lot of parts from old World War II military models, and I grabbed a few of those for the sole purpose of kit bashing. I'm also going to be sacrificing a Gundam kit that I've had lying around for a while. Not really wild about this suit, so I think I'm going to be turning some of the skirt armor and elbows into high-tech looking thrusters and whatnot. Sorry, Katra. If it wasn't abundantly clear from the jump, my ship is deviating quite a bit from the one in Lightyear. It's got a lot more panels and Greeblies and Doodads on it, and this is making it look a lot more Star Wars than Pixar, but I'm kind of into it. Plus, there are a ton of gaps and cracks and mistakes that I'm trying to hide, and adding a ton of detail is a great way to distract the eye from any minor imperfections. One of the few parts of this kit where I'll actually be going by the book is the landing gear, but it was designed as the landing gear for an F-14 kit, not for whatever I'm making, so I really hope that my ship doesn't completely collapse under its own weight. Alright, I really like where this is going, and I could definitely keep going, but I should probably move on to the next step. There's enough going on here to make it look like one cohesive machine instead of a bunch of junk that I glued together. Okay, fine, so it kind of looks like a bunch of junk I glued together. Bear with me, we'll paint it, it'll look a little bit cooler. Maybe. One of my favorite parts about doing craft projects, and something that I take personal pride in, is spending hours and hours creating something really cool and then just doing something totally dumb during the final stretch to mess up everything. In this case, I decided I should hit this guy with some automotive primer. Not inherently a bad idea, but the can I was using didn't have a very clean nozzle, and I probably didn't shake it up enough, and if that wasn't enough, I decided to prime the model outside on, I think, the windiest day in recorded history. As a result, it's gonna be a little rough around the edges, literally. They do make special hobby spray paint that sprays paint in a finer mist, so it's less likely to gum up your teeny tiny little cars, but spray paint that's made for actual full-size cars and other full-size things sprays considerably larger paint droplets, and if the nozzle's clogged, it's gonna be shooting out big old blobs. Anyway, after the black, I hit it with some gray, sanded some rough patches down, and slapped on a bit of white. Next up, we're going to be adding the blue, which I'm going to be doing with my airbrush, but first I gotta mask everything off. Now, not only is masking not fun, it's also time consuming. Once again, I might not be doing the most perfect job. In this case, it's not just in the interest of time, it's also because I hate masking and it's boring and I just don't want to do it. Weirdly, the color blue I picked is almost exactly the same shade as the masking tape, which kinda probably makes this less interesting to look at, but whatever. Anyway, after peeling the tape off, it is mostly pretty clean. There are a few spots where it's kind of fuzzy, that's called overspray. I can touch those up with a brush after the fact with some white paint. Next, I'm going to do that whole process all over again and add some stripes and fix up that sloppy edge on the front nose. After that, it's time for those little red stripes along the wings. More masking and more airbrushing. Now, one trick to reduce overspray is to use extra thin paint sprayed at a really low pressure so that it comes out slowly, and applying it perfectly top down on the masking, so if there's a gap between the tape and the surface, it just kinda doesn't go under there. Next, I'm going around and brush painting a few little details, all those greeblies and vents and whatnot. Painting anything with a brush by hand is never as clean or as even as using an airbrush, but it requires a lot less setup and prep work, and it's much easier to clean the bristles of a regular paintbrush than the inside of an airbrush. Now, one upside to my rough coat of primer is that it looks great dry brushed. I'm hitting the engines with a bit of gunmetal, and I love how they look. The flat black gives it a nice sooty look, which is perfect for exhaust. Earlier, I glued some strips of plastic onto the canopy to make a little frame for it, and that turned out to be a great guide for adding the panel lining with a gold paint marker. I still need to tint the glass, but we can come back to that. Next up, it's time for decals. I poked around online and found the Star Command logo and the ship insignia, dropped those into Photoshop, made some adjustments, and then printed them out on water slide decal paper and cut them out very carefully. I probably should have left a little more space on the wings to actually put down the decals, but I think I made it work. I also grabbed a few decals from other kits I had lying around and added those, and I'm totally kicking myself for not pulling these out sooner because the red and white striped ones would have been perfect for the wings. Those actually came from a snowplow. As for Buzz Lightyear himself, I took one of the tiny pilot figurines that came with the Tomcat kit and added some green stuff epoxy to build out the head and body to make it look less like a flight suit and more like a spacesuit. I don't completely love how the helmet turned out, but I think it's preferable than spending an hour trying to sculpt a tiny face. I was really tempted to spend more time on this little Buzz Lightyear figurine, but he's ultimately going to be hidden under the canopy. Now, normally with aircraft kits, the cockpit is one of the first things you build and paint, and then you have to build the whole plane around it, and it's become this kind of running joke with hobbyists about how much work goes into something that you practically can't see on the final product, and that's kind of what's going on here. To give the canopy a nice UV blocking yellow tint, I mixed some yellow ink with floor polish. Weirdly, floor polish is an extremely cheap and great way to add a gloss coat, and it's very popular with model builders. It can also be used to make clear pieces look less like plastic and more like glass. I think I used a bit too much ink here because it's way less translucent than I was hoping, but on the bright side, the fogginess helps obscure any sloppy details inside the cockpit and my messy little Buzz Lightyear, who looks more like Mysterio from Spider-Man. Okay, we are in the final stretch here. I've attached the landing gear using literally 3 different kinds of glue, which was nerve-wracking, but miraculously it is supporting my little ship, and I think it looks pretty cool. The final step is going to be a nice gunk wash. This is just regular artist oils cut with odorless mineral spirits and swabbed around all willy-nilly. Unfortunately, that bumpy orange peel texture from the spray paint makes this tricky since the added texture traps pigment on flat areas, which I would hope to be more clean looking. It does add contrast, which shows off all the paneling and greeblies and nooks and crannies much better than before, and you know what? I think we can call it a day. And here it is, Buzz Lightyear's XL-15 starship made from an old F-14 Tomcat, a bunch of spare parts, and a whole lot of elbow grease. All in all, I don't think it's my best work, but it's one of the biggest models I've built to date, and I managed to do it on a pretty tight schedule so we could get this video up in time for Lightyear hitting theaters. Now, if I was going to do this all over again, I would be a lot more exact cutting out the pieces so the end result was less lopsided, and I would definitely be more careful with my choice of primer and its application. That bumpy texture is actually really great for other stuff like organic textures or heavily worn rusted metal or terrain, but for space-age aeronautics, I think something smoother would have looked a lot better. And finally, I know I can make a better 1/48 scale Buzz Lightyear given a little more time. This one, I don't know, I think we're gonna keep the canopy on. He looks a little silly. Now that said, what do you think? Did this project go to infinity and beyond, or was it a highway to the danger zone? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, I'm always looking for suggestions for my next Kitbash Creatures project. If you enjoyed this video, throw us a like, and please share it far and wide so I can keep making this show. If you want more Kitbash Creatures, check out my living jar from Elden Ring, or the animal amigos that I made for Far Cry 6. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.